as much as they want. They can talk shit about lobbying and politics as much as they want. So there's still hope that people can communicate. They can make their voices heard. Maybe in the media, it's a little bit difficult because of the fairness doctrine, because now the media can go all partisan as crazy as they want, which is kind of detrimental to citizens forming their opinions.
Absolutely.
And then also kind of like that when lobbyism plays a much bigger role than maybe the average voter. But still, the average voter, the average citizen, has their free speech rights non-infringed, I would say, by these decisions. Correct?
Correct. That is absolutely correct. But because of all this money in politics, we're getting very bad policy results. Like, do you guys have gerrymandering in Germany? But you know what it is, right?
It's when you change the districts where you vote. So
I can further elaborate on that for our viewers, just so they can understand what we're talking about. So, for instance, gerrymandering, right? What the Republicans do, because they can't win on the votes. They can't win.
Can we just one, because I'm outside of all of this.
Yeah.
Do Republicans do that?
What?
Are you serious? Gerrymandering.
Oh, so it's more of a Republican agenda. I'm sure.
But I mean, if you're a shrewd, smart Democrat politician, you wouldn't be so dumb not to try to gerrymander in your favor.
So I think what has happened, because I'm not as familiar with gerrymandering as I am with the Constitution, but I do know the basics and maybe a little bit beyond the basics. Yeah. But your question was, do the citizens support gerrymandering? Oh, the Democrats. Okay, so
my question, because you were saying what Republicans do, and then I felt like this reaction. I'm like, come on, is it really just Republicans?
No. So
okay.
So the issue of money in politics, the issue of corruption and everything, it applies to both sides. Are there exceptions? Absolutely. There are wonderful politicians out there. I'm not going to name them because I know whoever I name, people are going to be like, no, they're horrible. We hate them. This person sucks. You suck. So I'm not even going to say it. But there are honorable, good politicians. But I think right now, the consensus that I hear from just even 老百姓, right, who usually don't even care about politics in America, everybody loathes Congress. I told you before, Congress has the lowest approval rating of any institution in America. It's at 23% now. And the President Trump had a 41 to 49% approval rating. So that just goes to show you how much the American people dislike Congress. Why do they dislike Congress? Because they get nothing done anymore. Because they want to get reelected, and if they don't do anything, then nobody can attack them on stuff that they didn't do. So
makes sense.
Yeah. So it's so we really have a long way to go in America, but I again am very positive. I'm very optimistic, because when in America has there ever been a time where we weren't in turmoil? All right. I like to say that to everybody. Think about it. We had the 90s were great for us, right? And the 2000s, except for 9/11. But before that, right? You had the riots, you had the LA riots, you had the civil rights movement, you had when the Constitution was being formed, there was all this infighting between, it was fierce, right? People got killed, people made enemies. America's just like that. This is not a new phenomenon, us being divided, and it's the product of a working democracy. So I am not worried. What I am worried about is foreign money coming into America that we don't know about. And that's happening, and they're influencing our politicians. And that was the biggest fear of our founding fathers, is having foreign countries control our politicians. And that is beginning to happen. And I don't know if they know it or they don't know it, or if they don't care, but we need to get rid of those politicians, because they cannot make good decisions for the American people if they are in the pockets of, the CCP through shell companies or whatever, you know? Like, I just think that they need to go. The second thing that they need to go, so I don't know what it's like in Germany, but here politicians, except for the president, they can serve unlimited terms. So you have career politicians, right? And usually during re-election, the incumbent wins, usually, right? Like I was most of the time. So you have these career politicians who don't live out in the real world. They don't know what the average person is thinking about, right? They have their own congressional health insurance. They have their own congressional pensions. They don't, like, except for Katie Porter, who's a single mom who like was writing stories about like her colleagues, like, and people don't like AOC, but at least she's a normal person. She's not a career politician. Yeah. People are very angry with this because, like, if you can't get the job done in 6 years as a senator, or like in 2 years, well, 2 years is kind of short for a House member, or if you can't, and you keep getting elected, right? So let's just say we give them 12 years each, right? If you can't get something done in 12 years, then you're not going to get it ever done. So let's move on to the next person. That's my opinion. So those are my two things. But we can move on to China if you want to, like, you know, talk, like, because I did want to talk, like, hear your thoughts about like the impact of like all this on like China and stuff like that. Not about like free speech, our free speech affecting China, but like how the lack of free speech or has benefited or maybe not benefited the Chinese people. Because yes, go ahead.
I think free speech is a layered problem. There is, like we just said, there is the citizen has a certain guaranteed right to whatever speech, and that is not absolute. It doesn't mean yelling fire in the movie theater. It doesn't even mean going to some other person's house and yelling at them. It's just not absolute. But then there's also media freedom. Then there's also academic freedom. And then there's also a very complex kind of relations between, I guess you could say, maybe a company, they have their own code of conduct that they agreed upon, or maybe they didn't even agree upon it, but they are concerned about their image, so they can just fire you if you did something wrong that has nothing to do with free speech. Like, I don't know, you just looked at somebody in the wrong way and they're like, oh, somebody might think this is racist, sorry, you gotta go. Yeah. And then people confuse all of these things with free speech. And to me, it seems as though Europe, or let's say Germany, like we try to go the legal route in saying, for example, Nazism, not okay legally. It's not going to be up to a corporation. It's not going to be up to the media or anything to police themselves, or social media companies. It's going to be just a question for the judiciary, where you go like, okay, well, was this a swastika? Yes, no, yes, illegal. Or did you do a Zeke Heil thing? Illegal. And America is kind of saying, no, I mean, you have more space there for maybe being a Nazi in public. Yeah. But it seems to me as though the different debate that is going on about free speech, where people use the word free speech, but what they really mean is, why did I get fired for using the N-word? You know, or for using the B word or the F word or whatever word on people. Free speech, please. I think this stuff happens more in the States than in Europe. It also happens a lot in Europe, but it seems to be like really happening in the States, where like you get all these cases of people losing their livelihoods because they didn't do anything wrong legally, but still they're at fault, right? So morally. And when we look at China, then there is no real legal basis. They have this what is it called? 寻衅滋事. Yeah, I don't know. I forget. But it's like picking quarrels and provoking trouble.
Yes, I heard about that.
Yeah, it's like this catch-all thing. Like, you stood outside of a McDonald's and you had a hamburger in your hand, provoking trouble. Yeah. You know, you were waving the hamburger. Or like 4 of you were playing cards in a park, picking quarrels. Like anything. Right. Anything can be that. And I don't know what it's, I mean, I'm not a legal, I don't understand the law, but one thing is for sure that the law in China is kind of subordinate to whatever the government wants at any time. So it doesn't really mean anything if they say, well, you have free speech. On paper, you do. On paper, you might even be a voting citizen in the state, in but in effect,
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You crack me up. You're exactly right. On paper, who knows? Maybe they do have free speech. Maybe they have the same constitution we do.
On paper, North Korea is called what? The People's Democratic Republic of something.
Right. And they're not. They're not.
No, and East Germany and West Germany, we were called the Federal Republic of Germany. We were a democracy, and they were called the Democratic Republic of Germany, and they were a dictatorship. It's kind of like, sure, I mean, whatever.
Yeah, it's just a name, right?
It's just a name. But I think the thing that's really makes life very difficult in China is that in the States, you have a legal ground to stand on. If you're, what's her name? Amy something from Central Park.
From Central. The lady with the dog that yelled at, that called the cop.
Yelled at that black bird watcher.
Right, the Karen.
Right?
Yeah, the Karen.
The Karen. If you're a Karen, you will lose your job, and you will lose. It's going to be devastating. The social punishment inflicted upon you will be devastating. But the police is not going to come to your place.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
You're not going to end up in a labor camp because you did this.
Right.
But it's kind of like the social mechanisms of kind of putting moral pressure on people, for better or for worse. You can always argue that it's not a very healthy thing to cancel everybody when they've said something. I mean, that's an argument to have.
Yes.
And I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's an argument. In China, that argument doesn't really happen because it's not an organic thing that happens. It's not like companies are worried about what Chinese consumers are going to think. Ooh, we were being discriminated against women. That's not the main thing. Ooh, we were being racist. That's not your concern. Your concern is what the party thinks.
Right.
So you have no legal ground to stand on to begin with. So your feet are already in the mud. Right. And then everybody else is going to put these moral standards on you that are also not grounded in what they really feel. Yeah. But they're grounded in, again, what the party thinks. So the bottom is the party. The middle ground is also the party. And if your head is still sticking up, then you're very lucky. But a lot of people just kind of drown in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, free speech in China is really, there's no academic freedom. There's no media. And if I'm saying no, I don't mean 0%.
Right.
It's kind of like very, very close to maybe the bottom 10% or something.
Yes.
But it's very difficult.
It's a fine line, right? Like, it's a fine line in China to know what you can say and what you can't say, and it changes from day to day.
That's a misconception. There is no line.
There is no what?
There is no line. Then no, there is. People will try to tell you that there is a line, and they will try to make themselves feel like they know the line, but there is no line. There's only the whim of the party at that given day. It's not like they told you yesterday, you can't say this, and then you don't say this and you're good. No.
So there's no clearly defined like parameters of what you can or can't say.
There isn't even an arbitrary line. There is just this swamp that you're already in. You by existing are already illegal. Like most Chinese people, they do illegal things constantly, and then no. I mean, you use a VPN, you're not sure if you're okay. They might get you anytime. You I don't know, maybe you're using Telegram, some other app, might not be so okay. You're doing all kinds of stuff and shady business, maybe local small corruption, maybe big corruption, maybe just with friends, but you're always kind of not really clean.
Right.
And there isn't like a line where you can just stay clean and you're like, okay, well, this is it. You know, I'm not going to talk about, this is what I used to think. I was on Weibo and I told myself, look, I will not talk about Tibet, Taiwan, and Tiananmen, the 3 T's. All right. But everything else is okay. And I mean, looking back, why would I even do that? I'm a German citizen. Why would I not talk about Tibet? It's kind of degrading to myself, to Tibet, and to everybody else. But I told myself, look, I want to stay on Weibo. These three things, that's going to be the line. And I had to learn there is no line. Today, somebody has a positive hormonal cycle, and tomorrow, no. And then changes. And it's like, you're dirty anyway.
Yeah, so a very good example of what you're saying is, remember that doctor that in the beginning of COVID that died of COVID, that like he just came out to warn people that this thing was happening. And like as a doctor, you would think that's your job, right? To like sound the alarm bells overseeing something. And I don't think he was thinking that he would be in trouble. And maybe he did think about it and didn't care. And so stuff like that, right? Like who would think that someone disseminating useful medical information when you are in the medical field as something that could be punishable? That's crazy. That just means if I'm living in China, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to talk about, butterflies and love and, like just, like shallow, superficial things that have no bearings on anything.
Yeah, but you can't. You can't. Like, I mean, there's still human people, right? So, like, for example, Li Wenliang, when you said he was disseminating this information, he wasn't. He wasn't giving this information to the outside world. He wasn't. He was giving the information about what he suspected to be a lung virus to his colleagues in a WeChat group. So he was saying, if you guys are doctors, be careful. Only to a group of doctors, not like to everybody. He wasn't making a viral post.
Okay, all right.
Viral. But that wasn't his intent. He wasn't thinking, I'm going to warn China now, or even Wuhan. He was just saying, guys, we're in this group of WeChat doctors. What was he? An ophthalmologist, an eye doctor. So he's telling his fellow gynecologists and, oncologists and whatever doctors they got, he's telling them, guys, wear your mask a bit more closely because there's something out there. That's all.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I definitely missed that little tidbit. So that makes it even worse because you can't even speak to your own colleagues about your work. Because, incredible.
Yes, exactly. Because he couldn't anticipate this thing, his little warning, to go viral. And then it was out of his hand. It was out of his control. And this little speech that would have been okay maybe in that group, it wasn't okay anymore. It changed character and it became this picking quarrels and stirring up trouble.
Right.
And they got him and they made him, they didn't beat him. They didn't detain him really. They just made him sign a little paper like, you're not going to talk about this again. And he signed it. And the tragedy of it is he is dead, but he might as well have lived and there wouldn't have been a news at all. It would have just been, okay, this happened. He's not going to talk about it. They're not going to talk about it. We are not going to hear about it.
Right.
And you can be sure that happened a lot of times because not only an ophthalmologist is able to identify pneumonia.
Right.
Yeah. And so I remember this happened to me actually, a thing where I felt like it was very emblematic of how China works sometimes. I was in Northwest China in Xinjiang and I was walking around like I do. And I had a little handheld GPS thing. And so because I have a temper, I got in trouble with the police because really my own fault. Like I was very rude and very impatient. And then they were like, you impatient guy, what's your deal? What do you do? And then I suddenly had to explain what I was doing. So they're like, what do you have with you? And I'm like, well, I got my cameras and my computer and my passport and like, I don't know, a watermelon. And they're like, what's this little thing that you got there? And I'm like, that's a GPS. Have you never seen a GPS? And they're like, give that to us. So they took my stuff, like the computer, everything, but also the GPS. And then they told me this is illegal. And I was like, how can that be illegal? This is being sold in outdoor stores in China and outside of China. It's like this consumer device that everybody has. And this was in 2010, so the iPhone 1 was out, and it had a GPS. It had Google Maps, right? Yeah. I was like, who is it illegal for? And they're like, it's illegal for you foreigners. Yes. And if a Chinese person is with you, they're illegal too, because they're kind of involved in your crime of maybe mapping the region or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was like, do you guys do you guys go to all those foreigners in Shanghai and Beijing and confiscate their iPhone because they have GPS on them? And they're like, no, but we could.
Yeah, that is yeah.
This is exactly the thing. It's like you don't even know how illegal you are, but you suspect that probably your lifestyle is somewhat illegal. Because first of all, it's unclear. Second of all, like there's so much stuff that is, like this picking quarrels or whatever. Like, was that really okay what you were doing? You were protesting at your school, whatever, might have been really, really illegal. If it goes viral, you're very illegal. But even like your small lifestyle decisions might not be legal when it comes down to it. Nobody's going to ask most of the times. But you're kind of by living already in this not good space. It's as if you're always cheating on your taxes a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you're like, I'm not really clean. If they ask, I'm going to get in trouble, but they don't ask. So it's fine. But really, they can ask.
I got to go back to the mafia analogy again, because you know how the underlings, they never know when they're going to get killed.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And sometimes they get killed for like the most innocuous, like non-reasons, right? So it kind of feels a little bit like that, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, that person might know something, so let's kill him because we don't want any trouble.
Well, that too, or like, let's kill them because we want to set an example, right? Like in a gang war, as I've seen on TV, it's not like I know, but you would throw at least that's what it was like in the 90s. They would throw the sneakers on the phone line.
We still do that.
They would be dangling there. So that means like some shit happened there. Why would you do that? Why would you even like go through the trouble? I imagine them throwing the sneakers up again and again until they finally hang there, because it must be difficult. So I'm like, you guys just murdered somebody and now you're going through this ridiculous exercise. So you really want to send a signal. And I think the same is true for the CCP. Like they pick individuals that were kind of thinking, well, I'm just kind of I'm in the stream of everybody who's also kind of not very clean. They're not gonna get me. But then they pick that one and then they make an example of that person. And then everybody else knows, okay, well, it's time to maybe, put your head down even more. And, yeah, that can be very brutal. And I think this whole free speech thing, it doesn't really work in China, because if they were clear about it and they would say, look, legally, like let's say they were like some sort of hardcore Germans and they would say, you can't say this, you can't say this, you can't say this, but this is what it is. And within this space, you're free and you're clean. Okay. But that's not what it's like. It's like kind of free speech if on paper, but in reality, always guilty anyway. Right. And if anything has any sort of impact, then it's going to get really bad for you. Right now, the mothers or wives or whatever, the families of those marathon runners, did you hear about it?
Yeah, Gansu, that's where my grandparents are from.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there, I mean, I think this kind of thing can happen anywhere. I think it was probably poorly planned. So the damage is massive.
Yeah, it's a treacherous country area.
Yes, I mean, what I'm trying to say is like, I didn't hear this news and I thought, oh my God, China is so terrible. I thought, oh my God, this was probably bad planning and a natural disaster. And it's just sad. But I wasn't condemning anybody yet, because I'm really just waiting for the data or whatever, the information to come out. But that doesn't help the people that have lost their husbands or sons or whatever. So they might get angry, and it's a normal human reaction. They get online and they're like, what did you do? My son was a super fit runner and now he's dead. And you gave me the information about it after making me wait for 2 days. That's not right. And so they post. And then the government makes their posts disappear, or makes their accounts disappear, or just destroys like the whole discussion, or sends these floods and floods of commentators on them and saying like, yeah, it's his own fault. He was not fit enough. Who are you to talk? You're in bed with foreign instigators. You're basically getting very close to picking quarrels and stirring up trouble. And so these people, they have to suffer 2 times. They suffer first from what happened to their husbands or sons or whoever, And then the second time that they suffer because they can't even make their grief publicly known and their anger. If this kind of thing happened in the States, I mean, you go running in Arizona, shit might go bad in Arizona, I imagine. You know, all kinds of stuff can happen. But and then I imagine people being involved in this thing, being maybe the families of victims, and going online and it being okay that they voice this stuff, even on national TV. They might be like, what were the organizers? What's Biden doing? Who will give me back my son? And it's okay. But in China, it's not okay. You are now in a realm where your speech is not protected anymore, even though you're only saying, I'm really, really angry about my husband's death in this marathon. Well, free speech, wow.
So can I ask you, what happened to that Chengdu mom that was sitting in that iconic picture where she's sitting on the floor with her, you know, and she's in despair? Wouldn't that be picking quarrels and causing, you know, whatever the you know the law is? Like, why didn't they arrest her? Because isn't that the same as her going online and like causing a scene? Or is it just is it because she was only physically there? And I don't know, but that image circulated around the world.
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, the thing is, nothing is enshrined. Like I said, there is no line, there is no strict rule. It's not like when this happens, this has to happen. Anything can happen. If they think the authorities that this woman protesting is directing public attention against the school, that might be okay because it's not the party, it's not the central government. Maybe, you know, a lot of these, you know what shangfang is?
Shangfang?
No, shangfang is when it's when people from the provinces, they go to Beijing to find the officials, basically the central government, and tell them about grievances that they have with their own local governments.
Oh, I did.
So for example, when the Sichuan, when this earthquake happened in 2001, was that 8? A lot of the parents, they tried to get to Beijing because they wanted to tell the Beijing government, look, these local officials, they built houses that fell down and like our kids died and now they're treating us like shit. But the local governments never let them get there. They would block the trains, they would send goons on them and just try to not have them go to Beijing, because what these people do is they really try to make a point, the people that go to Beijing, they really try to make a point of their loyalty to the central government. It's kind of like going to the emperor to complain about some unruly local officials and saying like, hey, emperor, I just wanted to tell you, these guys that you really don't know about, not because you're blind or bad, just because, you know, you can't know everything, they're kind of doing bad things, but I'm sure you will fix it. And so this lady is sitting there, as long as it doesn't kind of send this message of like something is systemically wrong with the party, maybe it's okay up to a certain point. If there's no crowd that gathers, you know, if it doesn't become 2 ladies and then 30 ladies and then 60 ladies, that's fine.
So see, so I think the issue with all, like, well, first of all, that very much reminds me of like, you know, the monarchies like in Europe where you know, like every so often the king allows the citizens to come in and he's like the judge and they're like, oh, my neighbor stole my chicken, or you know, and all of that. So it reminds me of that. So no, I didn't know that happened. But like, you know, after hearing everything you're saying, like, to me, it's like, is it no wonder that, you know, that the Chinese people have difficulties with grasping reality, number one, right? Like having any critical analysis ability, right? Like it completely deters that because you don't have all the information. So how can you even like critically think if your thoughts are like based on lies? You know what I mean? So you're reaching like all these bizarre conclusions because you're being fed either incomplete information or misinformation. Well, that's not exclusive to China though. I'm just saying, yeah. And you know, and also at the same time, like it has this effect of, you know, this like silencing effect where people don't want to talk about like, because they can't predict what will get them in trouble. They don't want to like discuss like let's just say good public policy. They don't want to discuss like how to make the country better. So like you're relying on what, the Politburo of 9 people to like decide the fate of 1.4 billion people, which is 1/5 of the world's population. 9 people are going to control that. That's some crazy-ish right there.
I was reading a short Twitter thread by a journalist that I like today, and I hadn't thought about that. That's why I like the guy, because he often says stuff that I never thought about. He said it's really difficult now to get Chinese people to comment positively on stuff. And the reason is because if you're like, let's say you're like middle-class Chinese or something, and somebody asks you like, what do you think about this awesome project here? Like maybe let's say a bridge or, you know, or some social stuff, some policy. Maybe 10 years ago, you would say, this is great. And it's fine because you were making a positive statement about policy. That's good. But now what they think is, because the pressure has gotten so big, is that what if I say this is really good now, but maybe next year the central government decides this was bad, then I am forever connected to this bad thing. So I'm not going to say anything about it, neither good or bad. You know, they're even afraid to voice their praise, because the praise might fall afoul of people that didn't like this thing that you were praising. I mean, it's really crazy at that point. And yeah, I think I wouldn't say like, I don't know, like when we talk about Chinese people not maybe being less able to think critically, this is something that I get a lot from my Chinese commentators, and I never quite get it really, because I feel like, I mean, we have so many people that were privileged enough to be born and raised, let's say in Germany, in a democracy where really like the society tries to educate them to become citizens, and still they're ignorant, and still, let's say we are ignorant, and still we fail at a lot of things, and still when we vote for the central government or for like the parliament, maybe it's 65% and 35% don't even bother to show up for the vote. So what does that tell you? Or like, you know, elections in the States where you go like, how many people voted when in 2016? Was it 60%? Was it a bit less?
No,
I don't know if
not even 60%. I don't think. I don't think it was anything close to 60%.
I don't know. I'm just, you know, like whatever it is, it's not enough. It should be more. It should be a healthy, robust part of the population that values the process and thinks like, I'm going to get educated and make a decision because it's a privilege and it's awesome.
Yes.
But yeah.
That goes to back to what you were saying about like the whole gerrymandering and like and the Republicans suppressing the votes. So I just want, like, we never finished talking about that, but I should let you finish that thought and then we can go back to that. So go ahead.
Well, I think one misperception is, and it doesn't only happen in China, it also happens in the States, and it also happens in Europe, that people really don't understand what free speech actually is. That is only the right of the citizens to, and not to say anything at any time, anywhere, to anybody.
Right.
But like a limited thing that is as limited as it is, it's awesome.